Welcome to IT Nation Wise Up, the podcast that skips the sales pitch and brings you real insights and strategies to help your business. We're your hosts, Matt Topper
and Vicki Bruns.
And we're thrilled to have you join us.
This is not your typical podcast. Our goal is to make IT community experts more accessible to you by highlighting the experiences so that way we can learn and grow together. Now, if you're looking to stay ahead in the ever-evolving tech landscape, stick around as we dive into some of the topics that matter to you most.
Before we get started, just a quick reminder to subscribe to IT Nation Wise Up and like so you'll never miss an episode. Now let's dig in.
Let's go. So, hey everyone, we are joined by Dan Hernandez today, who is an MSP based out of the San Francisco area. Dan, we'd love to learn a little bit more just about you in general and your company. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure, absolutely. So I've been born and raised in California. So I've been in the San Francisco Bay Area my entire life. I got my corporate experience at Bain & Company in the late 80s. So this has been my only job my entire life is supporting computers. And I started professional computer support back in the day when the Bain environment, when people are leaving and starting their own businesses, they needed IT and they were looking to hire me. So PCS started about 35 years ago. And since then, we've now rebranded to PCS Technologies. And we are really supporting the San Francisco Bay Area with all their IT. We specialize in working with nonprofits. We work with 41 nonprofits currently, but we've been in business a long time. So we have over 90 customers. So we work with attorneys and general contractors, architects. But what I'm most proud of right now is I probably built the best team we've ever had. We have 23 people and we're just hitting on all cylinders right now.
Fantastic. So one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you is that you had submitted a session to our security conference about compliance as a service. And me as a former MSP, my first thing I'm thinking is, can you tell us what that means exactly? Like for an MSP, what is compliance as a service? Is it just doing compliance? Is it some type of different paradigm around it? What does that mean for me?
Yeah, so compliance as a service has been something we've been talking about for about 3 years now. And it really all started with, we're your classic MSP. We have an advanced security stack and we build that in by calendar year. So ours is Security Plus 2024. And so we've gone through several different levels of that as times have changed, right? We have changed SOCs once or twice and things like that. But it all started with the advanced security stack. And then we get a lot of requests, as most of us MSPs probably do, on insurance, cybersecurity insurance applications, which take a lot of time and actually needs to be owned by the customer, not by the IT guy. So, we started talking about all this compliance as a service a few years ago. But what really took off for us is probably about 3 years ago, the San Francisco County and city and county, both San Francisco Health Plan and the San Francisco Department of Health really started holding nonprofits' feet to the fire when it comes to being HIPAA compliant. So we took that on and probably had about half a dozen large nonprofits, 100, 150 users that needed to become HIPAA compliant to maintain their contracts with the city and county of San Francisco. So it got really serious back then. And those requests from the San Francisco Health Plan are probably as complicated as any you've seen, really diving into having MFA turned on and all those questions, right? And then so what we created was a process to work with the nonprofit and work on their compliance as far as their policies, procedures, making sure all the tools are deployed right to become HIPAA compliant. We included time from myself and my service manager. So compliance as a service to us is, it starts with Galactic Advisors Client Watch, which is a tool we use to monitor everything going on out there for them. And then we partnered with another vendor that helps us with the policies and procedures. And since then, we're doing a lot more of that stuff on our own. And then, so compliance as a service at PCS is a breakdown of our advanced security stack, the client watch tool that we use, and then my senior service managers, also my security officers' time to help maneuver through those policies, works with the client to create all that. And then I act as a virtual chief security officer to make sure we're dotting our I's, crossing our T's, and doing everything required. So it's a completely new line of business for us, where we have our normal user per user rate, and our little details of backups and all that kind of thing. But then we have compliance as a service that's about 3 or 4 different line items, depending on how much support the customer needs. Now, if they have a team of a couple people that can really dive in and work with us, the cost is going to be a little bit lower. But if they want us to handle the heavy lifting and only get involved with the details of their organization, then the rate's a little bit higher. And so we've got it, so we've got it down to a process now where we get about 80% margin on this line of business, and it's repeatable.
Whoa.
So
wait, hold on. Can we say that one more time, Dan? How much margin?
80% margin on compliance as a service. We dialed it in and created a process so that it's really like cookie cutting. And now we're actually looking at maybe doing this nationwide. We're talking to a couple of very large organizations where we might do maybe 10 or 20 organizations at one time. Then that's something that we're trying to do maybe by the end of this year. So we've really got this dialed in at this point.
Yeah.
So a couple things.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
There's a couple things that jumped out at me from this, and one is you mentioned you largely are doing this with large organizations. If you're what everyone thinks of as a nonprofit, a couple of guys working out of the old broom closet and fighting for whatever cause they believe in, if you're that kind of nonprofit, are you still able to take advantage of this service, or do you have to be big for it to work?
Well, when I was describing that was when we started 3 years ago. Now at this point, we're doing this for smaller nonprofits, but they're more of the 40 to 80 employee nonprofits. The 3 or 4 user nonprofits is really not for us. We want to start at about 20 users for it to work out financially for us and for them. And so we do partner with a couple solo IT guys that can handle those 3 or 4 user nonprofits that just really need to kind of keep their computers going. What we do is full managed services, where I actually act as their outsourced IT director. So I meet with them quarterly. My team meets with them depending on the size and what type of rhythm they need to do this on either a weekly, monthly basis, so that we're providing this high level service. But it's more than just being an IT provider, but it's also giving the direction of IT to make all this happen.
Yeah, that's really cool. One of the things you were mentioning earlier before we started recording that I'd love to revisit, Dan, is how do you maintain profitability? I mean, at all, when you're working with nonprofits?
Well, the nonprofit space is something I've learned a lot about. So I'm the former board president at Telegraph Hill Neighborhood Center, and I just turned out on their board, and I've been on their board for 10 years. So working on their finance committee, working with different individuals in that organization, I've learned and understand how they get their funding from the city, county, state, and federal levels. And so the nonprofits I work with are pretty well funded for the services they provide. So there's several different types of nonprofits. Low-income housing nonprofits actually get really well funded and have a lot more services available to them. We work closely with Cisco and provided about 5,000 low-income housing residents with free Wi-Fi. And so that's a donation from Cisco.
That's really cool.
We partner with the city and county of San Francisco that'll bring free gigabyte fiber to buildings.
Wow.
So then all we do is get the Cisco equipment, design the network, and add labor to it. So there's a lot of different types of nonprofits. So the low-income housing are really near and dear to me because we live in San Francisco and we want to get people off the streets and,
Yeah.
and have the beautiful city that we do have. But then also working with a nonprofit Baby 100 Point Foundation that actually has a navigation center for homelessness. They have a drug rehab program. They have telehealth services in their building so that formerly homeless people or homeless people can go and get mental health services. And then we try to get them housed and off the streets. So different types of nonprofits get funding from different areas. And being fluent in that really helps me being kind of their outsourced IT director to help them pull all that off and be profitable.
Mm-hmm. I used to work for a nonprofit. I was the marketing director for a really small nonprofit, and we had a grant writer that was just like absolute treasure to us because their sole job is to go out there and find grants to be able to fund the nonprofit. And to your point, that's what I thought was really interesting about it, is that you're understanding what grants they have available that you can tap into. So that way you're not siphoning off of their funds, right? That they need for other things, but you're leveraging the money they're getting back from those grants to be able to support and help support the nonprofit, but then also in turn support the community.
Yeah, there's several different aspects. There's the type of funding they're getting in the contracts, either from the city, county, San Francisco Health Plan, things like that. And then because they need to be HIPAA compliant, then they can apply for grants that'll actually pay for our services for the year for that service, right? So It's a win-win. They get the HIPAA compliance that they need to be able to serve their community. And then, the costs are covered by the grant.
Is it just HIPAA? Do you do other frameworks or other regulations that may come up?
Yeah, we're started to do a few different law firms now. Over the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been getting a lot more requests from law firms that have to follow some type of framework in order to do work for their corporate clients. So we're in the process right now working with a mid-sized law firm, probably about 55, 60 people, to become SOC 2 compliant. And it's the process we've actually dialed into where we can help them hire the auditor and the accountant that will help set the framework and losing the thought of the term, but setting those controls. And then PCS helps work with the client to do, the advanced endpoint or the advanced security stack. And then we bring in my service manager, security officer to kind of work with them, all their policies, procedures, and things like that. And then I help work with the auditors and my team and the client to kind of get them to the point where they can pass the SOC 2 audit.
So you mentioned helping the client with writing their policies, procedures. Ostensibly, policies need to really belong to and come from the client's senior management. How do you bridge the gap between clients who just want you to basically give them a template that says, hey, put our name on this, right? Fill in the blank, like it's a Mad Libs, and helping them come up with the thing that they really are interested in and makes sense that fits their own needs?
It's a balancing act. We've been really successful in working with either an attorney, a law firm, or a nonprofit to become compliant within 90 to 120 days if they're really working with us. And then we have the nonprofit or attorney that just wants us to do it all and it doesn't work. So we actually need them to be a part of the conversation and the process. Otherwise, that process goes from 120 days to 12 months really fast. So if they want to stick to this and they're coming to us asking for this, so they need to make an investment in their time to make sure that we do this. We can set up the templates, but they have to sign off on it and they actually have to do what they're saying they're going to do. And then lastly is you have to be able to prove that they're doing what they're saying they're going to do. And that's the trick, is getting all that done.
What does the conversation look like when someone suddenly needs to be compliant with a framework or has some new obligation? And do you ever have clients that say something like, Aren't you guys dealing with this? How do you instill that shared responsibility mindset in a client that might not otherwise have that might not be mature enough? Like, what's that conversation look like?
It's education. It's over time in every QBR. We sit down with the client and we do our normal business review, and then it's educating them on what is their responsibility, and showing, and maybe even doing a level 1 risk assessment or level 3 risk assessment where we sit down with them for an hour or two and have them answer the questions with us so that they can actually see, wow, that's actually my responsibility. I need to make sure my staff is trained. So it's a process. I think the first 2 or 3 months of working with the new customer, they're learning. And then something like this will come up where, hey, the city just says we've got to be HIPAA compliant to get this contract. And then it's like, well, we explained all that, and now let's discuss it. Let's show you what your risks are. Let's show you what they're looking for, and then this is how we're going to get it done.
You ever walk into a client that's just starting from literally zero? Maybe they have decent IT, but no policies, no controls or documentation in place. And the reason I'm asking that is, like, say I'm an MSP and I want to start down this road. Where do you even begin with a client like that? Or right, they come up to me and say, hey, Matt, I need to be HIPAA compliant. Like, what do you do first if you're in that situation?
Well, if they're a current client, we would review their security stack and see if they can move up to what they need to be able to cover all their bases in that framework. And then it's running a pen test and getting them to do a penetration test and really seeing what their risks are. It's like, we're no longer behind four walls with a server. Now we have people working all over the country, working in different environments, and we have to assure that everybody's following the rules. And the only way to do that is with some vulnerability scans and a penetration test.
So, Dan, one of the things I'm really curious to hear more about is you mentioned that you sit on boards. I mean, working in the nonprofit world, it's all about who you know and making those connections in the community. So can you tell us a little bit about how your experience in working with nonprofits and being in the San Francisco area for so long has really helped your business?
Well, it's been about 20 years since we started working with nonprofits, but it wasn't until about 10 years ago where I joined my first board. And over these years, I mean, I was just saying before we got on camera, Friday was kind of a double header for us. We attended the Union Square Alliance luncheon where Mayor London Breed spoke, Supervisor David Chu spoke, and then Senator Scott Wiener spoke. And then as we're leaving, we were like, oh, you guys going to Taste of Telhi tonight, which is another large nonprofit gala event at Oracle Park. And then I got to see them all again there just a few hours later. So we're actually now networking at a much higher level than we ever have. And I'm just super excited about that opportunity. But my suggestion to any MSP owner is whatever your niche is, and if you don't have a niche, create one, even if it's multiple niches, but join an association, become a local expert in that field, and look for speaking opportunities and networking opportunities where you're going to be known by that community. And we kind of fell into this, but I worked really hard at being a leader in the nonprofit space about it's going to be more like 10 years ago when I met Robin Robbins, and I just sat down and wrote out my niche. And then since then, it's really hard to do dialing by numbers and looking for leads and prospects by just doing a bunch of cold calling and things like that. So what I decided early on is to become a local expert and be able to look for speaking opportunities and growing that niche in a different way than just your traditional cold calling sales tactics.
Yeah, if you find Dan on LinkedIn, he's got some really cool pictures of the San Francisco Giants Stadium that he was at. So it sounds like there's also some fun opportunities too, along with professional growth. And
I can't complain.
Going to the stadium sounds fun.
I got nominated to serve on the San Francisco Giants Community Fund towards the end of last year, and it was a pretty competitive process. There's a lot of people want to be on this board, and so I was happy to be selected as a new board member starting in January. I'll serve 3 years, but I've already attended their play ball lunch where I got to meet all the players. Barry Bonds showed up, and,
oh,
and it
wow.
was pretty fantastic.
He's a
Dusty
legend.
Baker was there. A lot of historic Giant figures were present, but also got to attend the opening day pre-party where I ran into Marilyn and Breed and others. So just being out there and networking and being seen has been fantastic. And it doesn't hurt to be a big Giants fan and get to have your first board meeting at the San Francisco Giants locker room. So it's pretty cool stuff, right?
That's pretty cool. You get to go on the field too, and
yeah, we got to walk around the field. It's if you ever want to really feel like a little boy again, go walk around with the players on the Giants field. There's nothing like it.
I'll bet.
That is really cool. I got to play a softball game that was to support a nonprofit in the Tampa Bay area a few years ago. And I was the only female to play on this mostly male softball game. And it was a minor league stadium. It was the Clearwater Threshers stadium, but it still felt really neat.
Whenever you get those opportunities, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Be in that stadium. I'm a big tennis guy, and years ago I won an event where we actually got to play a little match or whatever it was, a little tournament that was for those of us that won at a national level. We got to play on stadium court at Indian Wells. And when you do that, there's nothing more fun about it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And you were better off, Vicky. I wouldn't want to go to the Tropicana. Things like Twilight Zone. That's the weirdest stadium in baseball.
Why? Because it's all enclosed and looks like it's
the catwalks and all the weird rules. I don't know. That place is strange.
It is. I don't understand how, like, if you're, and I know we'll get back to the MSP stuff here in a minute, but I do find it really fascinating though when you're in a closed stadium and if somebody hits a fly ball, like those outfielders, how do you freaking find that ball? I still can't wrap my mind around it. It's got to be like a skill set that you have to learn.
Yeah, right. Every outfielder learns their home stadium. Back when the Astros had the hill and the flagpole in the outfield, they had to learn that, and the Sox with the green monster, and the Rays with the catwalks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have Willie Mays or Willie McCovey Cove, which is where Barry Bonds is hitting all those home runs out in right field. And people out there in the kayaks and stuff catching balls or chasing after balls and stuff. So we're pretty lucky. Oracle Park is just a gorgeous stadium. If you ever get the opportunity, it's right on the water and it's fantastic.
Yeah.
No, it is. I've never been there, but it is on my list of stadiums to visit. I'm a Mets fan in New York.
Oh yeah, the Mets just played the Rays.
Played would be pushing it. They got swept by the Rays.
Well, you got to take the wins where you can. So, I wanted to ask Dan, when it comes to really mastering like the compliance as a service offering, it sounds like you're taking this on the road and you are speaking to other MSPs about it. So what are some of the things that you hear from the MSP community after you get off that stage?
It's those of us that have been MSPs for a long time, we're engineers first, and then we had to learn how to run a business and do sales. So to me, I think I saw Jack Daly speak at a Robert Robbins event. The one thing that he said that really hit home for me is 100% of sales activities 100% of the time. So whatever you have on your list, you got to just sit down, make those phone calls, create that new line of business, and just force yourself to do things that you're not comfortable with. If we had this conversation 3 years ago, I was still kind of fumbling through this, and I had an idea, but now we're to the point where we're talking to. I got 13 leads in one day at an event for compliance as a service. So the need is out there.
When you were getting started, what did the internal discussion and conversation look like? And I say this because when I started going down the compliance road, I had all my internal engineers saying, I can't believe how much paperwork this is going to be. What do you mean we have to do all this change control and policies? Like, how do you get the whole team on board or the whole organization on board with this?
It's really funny. I just read the Arnold Schwarzenegger book, Be Useful, and he talks about the naysayers. Don't listen to the naysayers. Everybody I talked to was very negative about this. It's going to be too much time. It's too much work. But once, it's because you don't really know, right? Once you understand what you need to get done, and it took probably for the first year, I was doing a lot of it on my own, to be really honest. And then I had to sit down, and we do role playing, where I'm going to get on the call with my senior project manager, my service manager, and I go, okay, sell me this. They've seen me do it a few times. Now I want you to do it, right? So we practice. So you don't practice, if you get 10 new customers a year and you go on a few sales calls, are you going to practice in those few opportunities you get? Or are you going to show up prepared and ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
So my team didn't have a clue what I was talking about for probably the first 6 months. And then, you share it with them. I actually do my presentations in my huddle so that my company actually knows what this means. And then I have my service manager do the same thing.
That's a great idea.
For multiple people. And, I sat down with my senior engineer that's been with me probably almost 20 years now. And it's like, do you even know what I'm talking about? Because he's going in a totally different direction. He's not involved. He's building out servers and migrations, and he's knee deep in that world. So I actually sat down with him, took him to lunch, and explained it to him. Right. So you actually have to coach your team and mentor them, because I don't want to be doing this by myself. Right. Yeah. So now at this level, I need somebody else to do this setup. I can close the deals, but I can't do all the meetings. So
you got to create a bench.
It takes a little bit of time, but you gotta be willing to practice.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you, I've been in sales for a long time, and the first sales job I ever had, I learned that skill set of you get into a room and you're doing the role play, and it feels really cheesy at first and a little nerve wracking because you're doing it in front of everybody, but it makes you a better communicator, and it helps to tweak that value proposition, to your point, in that pitch. So when you do get that shot with a potential customer, then it's almost like you're reciting it from memory at that point, because you've had the practices, right? Like you've struck out with your peers, and now you're getting out there to hit the home run with the potential client.
Yeah, it's really awkward, when you get a few engineers in the room that now are doing different things, and you talk about, we're going to do some role playing, and they think I'm nuts. And I'm not doing this with a room of groomed salespeople. I'm doing this with a room of technical people, so it's even more awkward. But once you practice and you feel more comfortable, then it gets a lot easier. It's like anything else you do. I was a big tennis player, so serving in front of 400 people was natural for me. I actually thrived on that. So if I'm going to get on stage and speak to a gala event of 500 people, I'm gonna have that dialed in. I'm probably reading that 50 times before I actually present it. Right. So it's really important. The best people you see out there do a lot of practice. The whole thing with compliance as a service is really going to take off. If you're doing anything for your clients that are helping them even get a better rate on their cybersecurity insurance,
Yes.
You're not going to get a claim filled if they say they have MFA turned on and they don't. Right. So you actually have to instruct the customers. Like, I've had this conversation with people that don't want to up their cybersecurity game. And I would say, we just filled out that insurance application and you said you had MFA turned on. So guess what?
That's a good
we have
call.
to turn it on.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, your claim's not going to be filled.
Yeah.
And then they start getting it.
So let's talk about that for a second. Does the technical architecture and not even necessarily the deep configuration, but the higher level, the higher scale architecture, does that look different at your nonprofit, your compliance clients versus a client that doesn't have any regulatory obligations?
I try not to, but you can't force somebody to follow your security stack and do the things that we know they should be doing. We were dealing with a client last week that they didn't have MFA turned on, and it was like the main user that we've been talking to forever got phished. And we explained it to them so many times, but you can't make them do it. So sometimes it takes a phishing incident for them to actually go, okay, we get it now. But I think the best thing that I've gotten really good at is just being able to tell really good, simple stories about the risks that they're taking. Like, we had a client just like yours lose $137,000 to a man in the middle that redirected a wire transfer, right? It was this simple. And then they almost get phished, and then they go, okay, we see this now. But it's being able to explain it in a way that they kind of can't say no.
Yeah. I have a question to ask in terms of the evolution of compliance. How are you staying up to speed on what's happening and how to support your clients through the evolution of everything compliance as a service?
Well, it's kind of, I think the reason why I really love getting into IT, and when I started, it was data processing. So every aspect of it is, if you're not learning, you're dying. I think we've all interviewed that really good tech that he thinks he's a really good tech, but he's worked in the same job for 14 years and all he does is desktop deployments for an old version of Windows. It's like, no one's going to hire that guy, right? So if you're not upgrading your skills and constantly learning, then this is not the business for you. So I do travel probably 7 or 8 times a year to different, I'm a member of Evolve. I'm a former Producers Club member of TMTK. And, I travel and I learn. And the biggest thing that I would like every MSP owner should do is go to a non-IT conference.
Oh,
I just went to the EOS Worldwide Conference in San Diego, and it was one of the best conferences I've ever been to.
What was it? What was the conference?
It was the EOS Worldwide Conference in San Diego. It was one of the best conferences I've ever been to. The keynote speaker, I went to every keynote session, and I can't say I do that all the time. But for this event, I attended every keynote session. I didn't miss a breakout, and I really enjoyed it. Now, I go to other conferences now, and I'll skip some of that, because it's kind of redundant. But if you want to grow your business, go out and learn from these incredible business people out there, entrepreneurs. The EOS world is fantastic. And there are other organizations like that you can learn from. And don't always think like other MSP owners. We're kind of groomed that these are our numbers, our gross margin, our EBITDA, or this and that. But what's to say I can't just triple it? Why am I limited to 20% EBITDA? Why am I limited to 20% growth? Who's going to say I can't add $2 million of business this year, right? If you want to do it, go out and do it. Don't listen to another MSP owner that's struggling.
I have a question for you on the industry event that you just went to outside of the MSP space. What do you think is something that MSP conferences could take back and incorporate into their events that would be super impactful to MSPs?
Well, I think that a lot of these conferences kind of repeat the same thing. So you got to do something a little different. And, I think Robin Robbins, she has her process that's really sales minded. But the one thing I really enjoyed about her conferences is that she always brought in amazing speakers, and having somebody that really you can learn from. I mean, just in the years, Jesse Itzler is a big one for me. He's kind of the ultimate entrepreneur that I follow all the time. Jack Daly is another one. And I can go on and on. Robert Hershevek, Nito Combane, there's a lot of different people that when I go, I actually pay attention and I implement things that I learn. And that's, over 10 years. If you talk to Nestor Fernandez, executive director of Tal High, he would say I'm a completely different person today than I was 10 years ago.
If there is one habit that you could instill in our audience that we should either start doing or something we should stop doing to either get better at compliance or just to improve our businesses in general, what would that be? What's something we should either start doing or stop doing as a habit?
The biggest thing that really changed my direction and being able to add about $1 million a year of business every year is I got out of a lot of boxes. Like I let go of a lot of things. I no longer look at QuickBooks. I'm almost never in ConnectWise. I focus on business development and doing events like this today. And I let my leadership team do their job. And then I get my updates weekly. And I got to trust that if there's a problem, they're going to bring it to me. So it really is being able to kind of get yourself out of the weeds. Traditionally, I was an engineer. I was a senior engineer. I could, do all that, tear apart server rooms, put them back together. And then I'd go out and sell some great customers. And then I'd get buried for 3 or 4 months supporting those great customers. And then trying to start up sales again is another 6 months process. So the ups and downs per quarter was pretty much what I saw year after year while I was in those weeds. And now we see a pretty much steady growth and don't have those slow quarters, those donuts. How could you go 3 months without closing a customer, right? We've all done it. And the reason is because you get busy and you stop selling. So the number one thing is all sales activities, 100% of all sales activities, 100% of the time. That's the key.
That's good advice.
That is good advice.
Yeah.
It sounds like you completely personified the on the business versus in the business paradigm. You really embraced that and got yourself out of working in the business.
I took it so far, even my kids call the help desk. Right? I'm not going to work on their computer.
Wait, that is so funny, Dan. Wait, how old are your kids? Now I need to know.
Well,
are they teenagers
I have a 16-year-old, and then I have 2 grown daughters that are wonderful. I'm pretty lucky. But yeah, I stopped doing all that support many years ago. I used to say I haven't been hands-on for 10 years. It's probably been closer to 20 years now. And after doing this, I've been doing this for 40 years, so I don't miss it at all. I don't need to install another circuit. I don't need to even attempt to install a rack or a server or anything like that. I'm completely hands off and have been for a long time. And the difference is, do you want to keep doing that or do you want to grow and learn something new? I mean, as you get older, you want to be able to continue to grow into your field. And the biggest difference I feel right now with PCS Technologies and where we were 10 years ago is I'm no longer the janitor. I don't sit down with the CFO. He's going to say, hey, can you fix my printer on the way out? He knows that is not something for me, right? I'm not just the IT guy. I'm actually sitting at their table because of the things that I'm doing, the activities I'm doing today compared to what I used to do made me feel like the janitor.
You're setting the expectations to your team, to your family, and to your customers, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a joke around the office, back in the day, my techs used to like me to go out and help them do weekend jobs and things like that. Now I'm the last person they want to see, because I'm not going to be helpful at all. Maybe I'll go get them pizza or something, but
That's helpful.
That is helpful too. You're giving them sustenance to be able to have the energy to get through the job.
The last thing I'll say is I go to IT Nation every year. I go through the peer group meetings the first few days of the week, and then everybody leaves. It's like, the best part of that week is the networking I do in the hallways after Evolve. But so many people just end Evolve and they get out of town. It's like, why don't you stick around for a couple of days, create some better relationships with your vendors, change them from being a vendor to a partner, and really take advantage of what they can do for you.
That is great advice. And stick around for the other events that are usually taking place right after Evolve.
There's a lot of events at those events, that's for sure.
There is. Yeah.
Right. Well, Dan, thank you very much for coming on. I think we've all gotten some insights into how to do compliance and, more importantly, how to do it profitably. And to everyone else, thank you for tuning into this episode of IT Nation Wise Up, the podcast that's all about driving your business forward. If you haven't yet, be sure to like and subscribe so you'll never miss an episode.
And if you have topics that you'd like to hear about that we haven't covered yet, please reach out to us. We want to hear from you. Our email address is itnationpodcast@connectwise.com. And until then, remember that every day is a chance to learn something new. Thanks again, Dan, for your time. And thanks again for tuning in, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.